It's easy to forget that just a few decades ago, interracial marriages were criminalized in parts of the Western world. And while the UK never formally outlawed mixed marriages, relationships with ethnic minorities were uncommon.
We must be mad. Literally mad.
The world is smaller than ever, with more and more people making connections across cultural lines and continents.
I will always be in love with you. That's the promise that
Because she lived in America and I lived in London because of the time difference, I woke up one morning around 4 o'clock and then I saw a message from her. And the message was like, so how come you single? You seem like a really nice guy.
But that's
And I'm like,
First of all, that's not falling in love.
Well, okay. But this was when you sort of like...
That's a different question.
Okay, I guess. Okay. But you were the first to say I love you.
I was, but I already knew that you felt it a long time ago.
I can't argue with her.
Yeah.
She won this one. Before I met her, I used to think I was adventurous. Because when I do paragliding, for example, I'm like, oh, look at, I'm being really adventurous. And people would think, oh yeah, this guy's really adventurous until I met her. And the crazy stuff actually she does, I'm like, what? She would take me camping and all that kind of stuff. And I'd be like, do you see any black person here? It's all like white folks kind of stuff. But she got me doing all those stuff. And now I love them.
Yeah.
Even though maybe sometimes when she realizes that, yeah, okay, I might be wrong with what I'm saying here, she will come up with a creative way to make it sound like she's being right.
I can be quite hyper, and generally Darren is very calm. This old adage or cliched way that people think that women take a long time to get ready. That's not the case in our house.
But also, we can't always be naturally good looking when you just jump out of bed. I have to put a bit of work in.
put your ego aside and find yourself one.
In 2001, when the mixed categories were first introduced to the national census, mixed race people made a 1.3% of the population. Fast forward 10 years, and that figure almost doubles to 2.3%. As someone who is in an interracial relationship, I want to know whether the face of the UK could be mixed race in generations to come. The idea that we are headed toward a mixed race Britain is a contested one. Despite how prevalent they may seem, only 1 in 14 people in England and Wales are in mixed race relationships. I'm here at King's College London to meet with Dr. Adam Elliott Cooper, a research associate in the Department of Geography. I hope to understand more about what it means to be mixed race in today's society.
I don't think mixed race is a very useful way of identifying people because it creates the idea that some people are pure and some people are mixed. I don't think anyone's pure or racially pure. And I think the idea that some people are racially pure and some people are not is really, really problematic. It leads to the ideas of that purity is something which that exists for a start, and therefore opens up the idea that racial purity is something that can be strived for and something that can be won.
Bilgit and Stuart have been together for several years and have 2 small children. For them, raising a multiracial family still bears the burden of discrimination.
Concerned about the kids going to school starting next year, and then just the other kids bullying or being racist, and then for them to have to deal with that at the age of 4 and 5, it's going to be quite challenging. My parents didn't want to know about him, talk to him, they just ignored him. In India, it's a lot about getting to know the family, that your daughter gets married into. In India, a family is about 500 people,
Yeah.
cousins and first cousins, second cousins, third cousins, everybody's family. So it's all very alien to them.
Not long after we met, I read this book called The East India Company, which was about the beginning of the empire, and I do feel pretty rotten about being English.
If you go to places in the former British colonies, such as parts of Africa or the Caribbean or South Asia, where you have a significant number of, and historically you've had a significant number of white men going there as colonial administrators or in other positions of power, it's very likely that they will find wives and spouses who are of African or South Asian or African Caribbean heritage in those particular places.
Research has found that black and ethnic minorities equal just 1% of characters in literature. The population of mixed race people has risen, and so have the stories, leading to more books with mixed race protagonists. I want to know if there is a correlation between the rise in mixed race relationships and the media. Alex Shepard is a London-based social media strategist and author.
Is there a need for more dual heritage representation in literature?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a need for more dual heritage representation in literature. I was an avid reader as a child, but it wasn't until I was 17 that I came across a character in a book that actually represented me in terms of a character who was half Jamaican, half white British. That was a character in White Teeth by Zadie Smith, a book I still love to this day. And it kind of shocked me that I'd been reading books all these years and it took me that long to find a character who I connected with in that way, in a cultural way. It felt like there was so little UK teen books published by authors of colour, so I felt like either I knew they were being written, I knew authors were writing, but they weren't getting published. I felt like maybe I was worried that if I was to get published, the racial aspect of the book could be diminished in this book, and what could be more isolating than being a mixed race black girl being surrounded by a family of white people, in my mind anyway.
Does social media exploit, monetize, or fetishize interracial relationships?
I don't think social media itself is responsible for monetizing, fetishizing interracial relationships. I think those elements in the way that society reacts to interracial relationships already exist, but social media definitely magnifies them. So one example is those like mixed race baby Instagram accounts you see, where it's just picture after picture of mixed race babies, but it's a very certain type of mixed race baby. It's always light brown skin, grey, green, blue eyes, fair curly hair. And actually mixed race babies come in all shapes and sizes and all colours as well. And I think social media can bring those to the fore, but those fetishes and those stereotypes existed before social media came along.
According to the 2011 census, 65% of dual heritage women who have one white parent and one black are more likely to marry or cohabitate with white men in the UK.
I think the reason that relationships between black people and white people are identified with being people who are mixed race is because these two racial categorizations, these two social constructs, are constructed as opposites, black on the one side, white on the other. Right? They're seen as more opposites than any other ethnic or racial group. Right? You'll have lots of people who are mixed Irish and British heritage, and even though the Irish historically have been racialised as a different categorisation of human being, a subhuman being, a different racial category, they weren't seen as opposites in the same way that blackness and whiteness was. And so the fact that blackness and whiteness have been socially constructed or colonially constructed as opposites of each other, I think has made the relationships between these two categories of people hyper visible within the British imagination.
How far does our racial identity shape the way we view ourselves in society? Psychologist Zara Nazami specializes in racial identity.
As a therapist, racial identity is about the person's race, culture, where they come from, what their beliefs and values are. And for myself, my racial identity isn't so much external, it's internal. It's what I believe in, my morals, values, my culture, religion, and my dual heritage. If I think about one of my clients, she feels oppressed, but she looks like the oppressor. So if she does try and say, I'm going through this, I'm going through that, that's the part of the white guilt that comes into it is, well, you can't be struggling, look at you. Parents don't anticipate the difficulties children have when they're dual heritage. Some parents whose children's father or mother has left find it more difficult. And that's usually because they then have to reconnect with the person who's caused them pain.
While it appears that London has been gripped by mixed race mania following the royal wedding, I'm curious to whether there are others in less diverse city who are not so by the Meghan effect. I'm on my way to Solihull, a suburb just on the outskirts of Birmingham, to meet with couple Bianca and Oliver. They are due to have their first child together, who will be of multi-ethnic heritage.
Decided to get a Father's Day card for Oliver, as it's kind of technically, I guess, his first Father's Day, and I know he'd really appreciate something for the day from his soon-to-be son.
We met at Keele University. It was on a night out. We've had issues with people not liking our relationship publicly. So when we went to Dublin, you can tell the story.
Okay. Yeah, we went to Dublin. It was for my birthday, if I remember correctly. But he surprised me with a visit. So we'd just been to the Guinness brew house, and we were wandering around just looking for places to see and places to get a drink and stuff. So yeah, we went into one of these pubs, and as soon as we got in, it was just full of these old Irish men. Like, all of their eyes were like looking at us, and it was kind of a, oh, what the hell, sort of. It was an unpleasant surprise. I personally don't think that in a few generations' time that they'd make the whole of Britain mixed race. I think, for one, the way that communities do tend to mix in terms of race and culture and things like that, that only really happens on a large scale in cities. You're never going to find, old Farmer Giles with loads and loads of mixed race children in the middle of nowhere, just because it's just the fact that the rural communities are less diverse.
I guess there are two ways in which racialisation can operate, right? There's the racialisation which kind of society imposes upon you. It categorises you in a specific way. And then there's the racialised identity which you have kind of internally and how you identify. And sometimes these two things overlap. Sometimes they're exactly the same, and sometimes they're completely different. So certainly, if I grew up being told by my family that I was mixed race rather than being black, I may well have chosen to identify in a different way. And you can see this with certain people who have one black parent and one white parent going around the world deciding that they would like to identify as mixed race. This doesn't have any bearing on the fact that it doesn't mean that they're half as likely to be stopped and searched by the police as someone with two black parents, or half as likely to be expelled from school as someone with two black parents, or half as likely to be turned down from a job interview as somebody with two black parents, because that's not the way in which race is socially constructed. So some people who decide to identify as mixed race or half black and half white are deciding to do is identify something which is quite different to the way in which society categorises them.
I will always be in love with you. That's the promise that I made to you. Feeling low and I'm feeling blue, and I'm half the guy. And I can't remain in a life that stays unchanged.